Warning. Prepare for the truth no one dares to tell. A sleek corporate jet, the symbol of his limitless power, sliced through the clouds, carrying billionaire Alexander Thorne toward a secret weekend in the Cayman Islands with his mistress. He believed he was the master of deception, certain his pregnant wife, Victoria Ashford, suspected nothing back in their penthouse in Manhattan. But he had made one fatal billion-dollar mistake. The very power that built Alexander's empire created his blind spot. He never saw his wife as a threat. Now, armed with a team of ruthless private investigators and the knowledge of a crime far deeper than infidelity, Victoria was waiting. With one perfectly timed phone call, she was about to prove that there is no fury like a woman with a $1.5 billion inheritance and a plan for total annihilation. Before you immerse yourself in this story of corporate betrayal and silent vengeance, please like and subscribe so you don't miss a single secret that the Ashford dossier will unveil. 1. The scent of a beautiful lie. The scent of 1,000 white roses flown in that morning from Ecuador should have been a comfort. For Victoria Ashford, however, it was the cloying fragrance of a beautiful lie. The roses, a standing weekly order from her husband, flooded their sprawling penthouse on Park Avenue, an aggressive reminder of his supposed devotion. But for the last 3 months, the thorns had felt more real than the petals. Victoria, 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son they had already named Liam, ran a manicured hand over the smooth, cold marble of the kitchen island. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished chrome of the Sub-Zero fridge. She was a woman who seemingly had it all. At 29, she was the wife of Alexander Thorne, the charismatic 35-year-old CEO of Thorne Global, a vast conglomerate with tendrils in everything from aerospace technology to luxury hospitality. Their wedding, a lavish event at a historic estate outside New York, had been the social event of the decade, a union of old money heritage and new money ambition. Victoria's family, the Ashfords, were an institution in American high society, their wealth rooted in centuries of banking and commerce. Alexander, conversely, was a self-made titan, a man whose relentless drive had propelled him from modest origins to the pinnacle of the financial world. He was handsome, charming, and, until recently, Victoria believed he was completely hers. The first crack in the facade had been almost imperceptible, a late-night board meeting that stretched until 3 a.m., a business trip to Tokyo that her father, a man with an almost psychic understanding of global trade, casually mentioned seemed odd given the current market climate. Then came the whispers, the subtle changes in Alexander's behavior. He began guarding his phone with the ferocity of a Cerberus, its screen always angled away from her. The lingering scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, a faint, musky jasmine, clung to his clothes on more than one occasion. When she questioned him, he laughed it off. "Must have been a long hug with one of the investors' wives, darling. You know how the Europeans are." But Victoria wasn't foolish. She had been raised in a world where women were expected to be beautiful, hostesses, elegant, and above all, discreet. They were taught to turn a blind eye to the indiscretions of their powerful husbands, to preserve the sanctity of the family name and the fortune it represented. Her own mother, a woman in impeccable Chanel suits, had once told her, "Men of his stature, dear, have appetites. A wife's duty is to be the main course, not to fret over the occasional amuse-bouche." Interaction. Do you think Victoria should have confronted Alexander earlier? Or was her patience a clever strategy? Share your thoughts in the comments. For a while, Victoria tried to heed that advice. She tried to swallow the bitter pill of suspicion, focusing on the baby growing inside her. the future of the Thorne-Ashford dynasty. She threw herself into designing the nursery, a celestial-themed haven in navy and gold, with a hand-painted mural of constellations on the ceiling. She hosted charity galas, her pregnant belly a symbol of domestic bliss, all while a cold, silent dread coiled in her stomach. The breaking point had come only a week ago. Alexander was in the shower, and his phone, carelessly left on the cashmere throw on their four-poster bed, buzzed incessantly. It was a new phone, a sleek, bespoke device from a Swiss tech boutique, ostensibly for enhanced security. He had two, one for business and one for personal use. This was the personal one. On the lock screen, a series of messages from a name she didn't recognize flashed in rapid succession. Cayman can't get here soon enough. Counting the hours, I booked our usual suite at the Four Seasons, and then the one that made her blood run cold. Don't worry about the bird in the gilded cage. She won't suspect a thing. The bird in the gilded cage. The cruelty. The dismissive arrogance. It shattered what little composure Victoria had left. She wasn't just a wife being cheated on. She was an object, a pretty possession to be handled and lied to. In that moment, something inside her changed. The compliant, well-bred heiress retreated, and a woman she never knew existed, a woman forged in the crucible of betrayal, began to emerge. That night, she didn't confront him. Instead, she played the role of the devoted, slightly tired pregnant wife to perfection. She listened intently as he spoke of an unavoidable, last-minute business trip to the Cayman Islands. A crucial meeting with a Swiss banking consortium, he explained, his sea-blue eyes full of convincing conviction. It's a deal that could redefine the European arm of Thorne Global for the next decade, he'd said, his hand resting on her swollen abdomen. I'll only be gone 48 hours, my love. I'll be back before you have a chance to miss me. Victoria had smiled, a sweet, understanding smile, and wished him well. Of course, darling. Business is business. Liam and I will be waiting. But while he meticulously folded his bespoke suits into his handcrafted leather carry-on, Victoria was making plans of her own. She had spent her life surrounded by power, and had learned its lessons well. Information was the ultimate weapon, and she was about to arm herself to the teeth. Her first call was to a man her father had used for years, a private investigator, discreet and ruthlessly efficient, named Marcus Thorne, no relation to Alexander. Marcus was a phantom, a former intelligence operative who now ran a security boutique out of London, catering to the ultra-rich. He specialized in the kind of problems that couldn't be solved with a simple lawsuit or a press release. He was expensive, but to an Ashford, that was of little consequence. Mr. Thorne, Victoria had said, her voice firm and cold, a stark contrast to the turmoil of emotions that raged within her. I have a job for you. My husband, Alexander Thorne, is flying to the Caymans tomorrow on his private jet, tail number N88X. He believes he is going to a business meeting. I believe he is meeting his mistress. I want to know everything. Who is she? Where are they going? What are they doing? I want photographic and video evidence, and I want it to be irrefutable. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Marcus's clipped British accent. Understood, Mrs. Thorne. We have a team stationed in the Caymans. Consider them already in motion. The usual channels for payment? Of course, Victoria replied. And Mr. Thorne, discretion is paramount. No one, especially my husband or my father, must know of my involvement. My client confidentiality is the cornerstone of my business, Mrs. Thorne. You have my word. As the morning sun streamed into her immaculate kitchen, casting long shadows across the floor, Victoria felt an eerie calm. The waiting was the hardest part. Alexander's jet had lifted off from Teterboro Airport an hour ago. She had tracked its flight path online, a thin blue line curving across the Atlantic. a digital representation of her husband's deceit. He thought he was flying toward a weekend of illicit passion. He had no idea he was flying into the eye of a hurricane she, his pregnant wife, was about to unleash. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. The number of a woman who owed her a favor, a woman whose career was built on exposing the kind of secrets Alexander was so desperate to keep. A woman named Scarlett Blake, the host of the world's most popular and feared gossip podcast, The Blake Report. "Scarlett," Victoria said, her voice soft as velvet. "I have a story for you. A story that will make you more famous than you ever dreamed." 2. The Gilded Cage and the Corporate Fraud. The cool, clean air of the Cayman Islands was a welcome change from the humid heat of a Manhattan summer. As Alexander Thorne stepped down from his jet at the private terminal, he felt a familiar thrill, an intoxicating blend of power and anticipation. He was a man who thrived on conquest in the boardroom and, he had to admit, in other, more clandestine arenas. The deal with the Swiss bankers was real, a convenient, necessary piece of business that provided the perfect cover for the true purpose of his trip. A weekend with her. His mistress was a woman named Zara Petrov, as sharp and sleek as her cheekbones. She was the head of art acquisitions for a rival Russian oligarch, a woman whose beauty was matched only by her ambition. They had met 6 months ago at an art auction in Christie's in London, where they'd engaged in a fierce bidding war over a rare Monet. Alexander had won the painting, but Zara, with her dark, piercing eyes and a wit as sharp as broken glass, had captured his attention. Their affair had begun that night, a whirlwind of stolen weekends in Paris, clandestine meetings in Dubai, and whispered promises in the back of chauffeured cars. Zara was everything Victoria was not. Where Victoria was soft, Zara was sharp. Where Victoria was old money grace, Zara was a self-made vixen, a woman who had climbed from obscurity and was unapologetic about her desires. She was a challenge, an intoxicating escape from the predictable, earnest world he inhabited with his wife. The pregnancy had only amplified this feeling. Impending fatherhood felt less like a joy and more like the closing of a chapter, a final, irrevocable step into a life of duty and responsibility. Zara was his last taste of freedom, his rebellion against the gilded cage he had so carefully built for himself. A sleek black Mercedes S-Class awaited him on the tarmac. As he slid into the luxurious leather interior, his phone buzzed. A message from Zara. "Suite 702. Don't keep me waiting," he smiled. The game was on. Meanwhile, a few hundred yards away, in an unmarked rental car, parked with a clear view of the private terminal, 2 men sat in silence. They were part of Marcus Thorne's team, a pair of former Special Forces soldiers who were now highly paid operatives in the world of corporate espionage and private investigation. They were patient, methodical, and completely invisible. A telephoto camera with a state-of-the-art image stabilizer rested on the dashboard. Its lens was trained on the Mercedes. Every movement, every detail was being captured. The lead operative, a stoic Englishman named Thomas, spoke into a small, encrypted communication device. "Target has landed. He's in a black S-Class, license plate K998. We are mobile, tracking their movements, sending live feed to the secure server now." Thousands of miles away, in her darkened home office overlooking Central Park, Victoria watched the live feed on a large, high-definition monitor. She saw her husband's familiar, confident swagger as he walked to his waiting car. She saw the slight smile on his face as he looked at his phone. A wave of nausea, unrelated to her pregnancy, washed over her. It was one thing to suspect, To know deep in your soul that you were being betrayed. It was quite another to watch it unfold in real-time, high definition. Her hand trembled as she reached for a glass of water. She had to stay strong. This was not the time for tears or weakness. This was the time for cold, calculated precision. She had a plan, a multifaceted attack that would not only expose Alexander, but also protect her and her unborn child. Phase 1 was already in motion. Marcus Thorne's team would gather the evidence, the irrefutable proof of the affair. Phase 2 involved Scarlett Blake. Victoria had given Scarlett the exclusive, the promise of a story that would shake the foundations of New York society. But she had given strict instructions. The story was not to be released until Victoria gave the signal. The timing had to be perfect. Phase 3 was the most complex and the most dangerous. It involved Thorne Global. Victoria, despite her socialite exterior, had a sharp business mind, a trait she had inherited from her father. She had sat on the board of several of her family's charitable foundations and had a better grasp of corporate governance than Alexander gave her credit for. For the past week, since discovering the messages on his phone, she had been secretly consulting with a team of forensic accountants and corporate attorneys, a team so discreet they communicated only through encrypted channels and were paid in untraceable cryptocurrency. She had instructed them to conduct a deep dive into Thorne Global's financials, specifically looking for any anomalies, any unusual transactions, or shell companies that might be linked to Alexander's personal activities. She had a hunch, an intuition that his recklessness in his personal life might extend to his professional life. If she could find evidence of financial impropriety, she would have leverage that went far beyond mere infidelity. It would be the difference between a messy public divorce and a carefully orchestrated corporate takeover. Back in the Caymans, Alexander's Mercedes pulled up to the grand entrance of the Ritz-Carlton, Grand Cayman, a bastion of luxury on the shores of the Caribbean. He was greeted by the hotel manager, a man who knew him well and was the soul of discretion. "Welcome back, Mr. Thorne. Everything is prepared as you requested." "Thank you, Jean-Luc," Alexander said, sliding a $100 bill into the manager's hand. "You know how much I value your attention to detail." He skipped the lobby, taking a private elevator straight to the 7th floor. He walked down the quiet, thickly carpeted hallway to Suite 702, the presidential suite, a sprawling apartment with panoramic ocean views. He opened the door, and there she was. Zara stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows with a glass of champagne in her hand, wearing a silk robe that clung to her slender figure. She turned, a slow, predatory smile on her face. "You're late," she purred, her Russian accent thick and seductive. "Had to make a stop," Alexander said, his voice low. He walked toward her, his eyes devouring her. He had brought her a gift, a small velvet box from Cartier, a jeweler known for its outrageously expensive, rare diamonds. Inside was a necklace, a cascade of canary yellow diamonds that must have cost a small fortune. Zara's eyes widened at the sight of it. "For me? You shouldn't have." But her hands were already reaching for it, her fingers tracing the cold, hard facets of the stones. From a building across the street, a female operative on Marcus's team, a woman with the steady hands of a surgeon, captured the entire scene through the lens of a powerful telescopic camera. The gift, the embrace, the passionate kiss that followed. Every frame was a nail in Alexander Thorne's coffin. Victoria watched it all on her monitor, her face a stone mask. The pain was a physical thing, a sharp, stabbing ache in her chest. But beneath the pain, a cold, hard anger began to crystallize. She saw the diamond necklace, a trinket bought with the money that was supposed to be building a future for her son. She saw the way he looked at Zara, a look of raw hunger he hadn't given her in years. She picked up her phone. It was time to set Phase 2 in motion. She dialed Scarlett Blake. "Scarlett," Victoria said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I have an update for you, and a name. Zara Petrov, head of art acquisitions for the Antonov Group. They are at the Ritz-Carlton in the Caymans, Suite 702, and he just gifted her a very, very expensive necklace." She could almost hear the molten smile in Scarlett's voice. "This is pure gold, Victoria. Pure gold. When can I publish?" "Soon," Victoria said. "But not yet. I want to let him enjoy his little getaway a little longer. I want him to feel safe, and then when he least expects it, we're going to bring his world crashing down." She hung up the phone and turned her attention back to the monitor. The live feed from the Caymans now showed Alexander and Zara, champagne flutes in hand, laughing on their suite balcony, the city lights twinkling behind them like 1,000 judging eyes. They looked like a king and queen surveying their domain, but they didn't know their kingdom was built on a foundation of lies, a foundation that was about to crumble. And Victoria, the woman they had so carelessly dismissed as the bird in the gilded cage, was holding the detonator. Interaction. Do you think Alexander will regret underestimating Victoria? Comment your opinion, and don't forget to share this story with your friends to see Alexander's reaction. 3. The collapse and the CEO's fall. For the next 24 hours, Victoria became a ghost in her own home, a silent observer of a life that was no longer hers. She moved through the opulent rooms of the penthouse, her phone and tablet her only companions. The live feeds from Marcus Thorne's team in the Caymans were a constant, brutal torrent of her husband's betrayal. She watched him and Zara dine at a Michelin-starred restaurant, their heads bowed in intimate conversation. She saw them stroll hand in hand along the shores of the ocean, their silhouettes stark against the sunset. She watched them return to the hotel, arms intertwined, disappearing into the gilded cage of their suite. Every image was a new wound, a new layer of pain. But with the pain came a chilling clarity. The sadness was still there, a heavy, suffocating blanket, but it was now interwoven with an iron resolution. She was no longer just a heartbroken wife. She was a woman on a mission, a general marshaling her forces for a war she had no intention of losing. Her days were a blur of encrypted calls and secure video conferences with her legal and financial teams. The forensic accountants, a team of brilliant but socially awkward geniuses operating out of an unmarked office in Zurich, had been working around the clock. They were sifting through the labyrinthine financial records of Thorne Global, following the digital breadcrumbs Alexander, in his arrogance, had surely left behind. The breakthrough came on the second day of Alexander's trip. Victoria was on a call with the head of the accounting team, a man who went only by Orion. "We found something, Mrs. Thorne," Orion said, his voice monotone and dispassionate. "It's clever, very clever, but not clever enough." He explained that Alexander had set up a series of shell corporations registered in a constellation of tax havens, the Cayman Islands, Panama, the British Virgin Islands. On the surface, these companies appeared to be legitimate investment vehicles, part of Thorne Global's complex international strategy. But when Orion's team peeled back the layers of legal and financial obfuscation, they found the truth. The bastard has been using these shell companies to siphon money out of Thorne Global, Orion explained. Small amounts at first, a few $100,000 here and there, disguised as consulting fees or brokerage commissions, but the amounts have been increasing exponentially over the last 6 months. "We're talking tens of millions of dollars, Mrs. Thorne." Victoria's blood ran cold. This was far worse than she had imagined. This wasn't just infidelity. This was large-scale corporate embezzlement. "Where's the money going?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "That's the interesting part," Orion replied. It's being funneled into a single account at a private bank in Liechtenstein. The account is held by a trust, and the sole beneficiary of that trust is a woman named Zara Petrov. Victoria felt the air leave her lungs. The diamond necklace was a trinket. This was the real prize. He wasn't just having an affair with Zara. He was funding her. He was stealing from his own company, his future, his son, to build a new life with his mistress. And there's more, Orion continued. One of the shell companies, a firm named Apex Holdings, was used to purchase a property, a very expensive property. He sent her a file. Victoria opened it to find the deed and architectural blueprints for a stunning modernist villa perched on a cliffside in Portofino, Emilia, Italy. The villa, still under construction, was a masterpiece of glass and steel, with an infinity pool that appeared to merge with the Ligurian Sea. The purchase price was a staggering $30 million, and the registered owner was Apex Holdings. The sheer audacity, the depth of his deceit, was breathtaking. He wasn't just planning a weekend getaway. He was building a new life, a new home, a new future, all with stolen money, and he was doing it right under her nose. "I need you to document everything, Orion," Victoria said, her voice now hard as steel. "Every transaction, every email, every bank transfer. I want a dossier so thick and so irrefutable that it will bury him." "Consider it done, Mrs. Thorne. We'll have a complete dossier ready for you within the hour." After the call ended, Victoria sat in silence for a long time. The architectural blueprints of the Portofino villa glowed on her screen. The beautiful house meant for another woman was a monument to his betrayal, but it was also his greatest vulnerability. It was the loose thread that, when pulled, would unravel his entire world. She thought of her father, Lord Alistair Ashford, a man of unbending principle, a man who valued integrity and honor above all else. He was a non-executive board member of Thorne Global, a position he had taken to advise Alexander and guide the young CEO. He had trusted Alexander, had welcomed him into his family. The discovery of the affair would be a deep personal blow to him, but the discovery of the embezzlement would be an unforgivable sin, a betrayal of everything her father stood for. She knew what she had to do. It was time to loop her father in, but she had to be careful. She had to present it in a way that compelled him to act not just as a wounded father, but as a responsible board member, with a fiduciary duty to the company and its shareholders. Meanwhile, in the Caymans, Alexander Thorne felt invincible. The business meeting with the Swiss bankers had gone exceptionally well. They had agreed in principle to a new line of credit for Thorne Global's European expansion, a deal that would be hailed as a major accomplishment in the financial press. His weekend with Zara had been a perfect, intoxicating escape. As he packed his bags to return to New York, he felt a sense of renewed vigor. He believed he had successfully compartmentalized his life, that he could have it all. The respectable, pregnant wife and the prestigious family name in Manhattan, and the passionate, exhilarating mistress reserved for his personal pleasure. His phone rang. It was Victoria. He let it ring for a moment, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. The bird in the gilded cage calling for her master. He finally answered, his voice a soft, practiced mask of affection. "Hello, my love. I was just thinking about you. Meetings went better than I ever hoped. I'm on my way to the airport now. I'll be home before you know it." "That's wonderful, darling." Victoria's voice came over the phone, syrupy sweet like honey. But beneath the sweetness was a new, unusual note, a hint of something cold and sharp. "I have a surprise for you when you get back, something I think you'll find illuminating." "A surprise? I love surprises," Alexander said, a slight unease beginning to prickle the back of his neck. "What is it?" "You'll have to wait and see," Victoria replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But I'll give you a hint. It involves a woman named Zara Petrov, a villa in Portofino, and the board of directors of Thorn Global." The phone went dead. Alexander stood motionless in the middle of his hotel suite, the phone still glued to his ear. The blood drained from his face. Zara, Portofino, the board of directors. It was impossible. How could she know? How could she know? A wave of cold, nauseating panic washed over him. He looked around the suite, the rumpled bed, the empty champagne bottle, the lingering scent of Zara's perfume. The walls of his carefully constructed world were beginning to close in on him. The bird was no longer in the gilded cage. She was out, and she was coming for him. He frantically tried to call his office, his lawyer, anyone who could tell him what was happening. But it was too late. The storm he never saw coming was about to break, and he was standing directly in its path. Interaction. Do you think Alexander can escape the consequences, or will his empire crumble? Leave your comments and share this story so more people join the conclusion. 4. Checkmate and the Empress Ascendant. The flight back to New York was the longest 8 hours of Alexander Thorn's life. The luxurious cabin of his corporate jet, usually a sanctuary of calm and control, felt like a prison cell hurtling through the sky. He paced the plush carpet like a trapped animal, his mind racing to piece together how his carefully constructed world had imploded so spectacularly. Zara, Portofino, the board. Victoria's words echoed in his ears, a death knell for the life he knew. He had tried calling Zara, but her phone went straight to voicemail. He had tried calling his contacts at the Liechtenstein Bank, but they were evading him, citing client confidentiality. Every door he tried to open slammed shut in his face. He was flying blind into a hurricane, and the hurricane's name was Victoria. He had underestimated her. He had seen her as a beautiful, pliable creature, a perfect accessory to his life of power and success. He had never imagined the steel beneath the silk, the sharp, strategic mind hidden behind her well-bred society smile. He had made the fatal mistake of confusing grace with weakness. When the jet finally landed at Teterboro, he was not met by his usual chauffeur. Instead, a grim-faced man in a dark suit he didn't recognize was waiting on the tarmac. "Mr. Thorne," the man said in a flat, impersonal voice, "I'm here to escort you to an emergency board meeting at Thorn Global Headquarters." "A board meeting? It's midnight," Alexander protested, his voice tinged with panic he could no longer hide. "The board has been convened, sir. It is not a request." The drive into Manhattan was silent and tense. The familiar, glittering skyline of the city he had conquered now looked menacing, its towering buildings like headstones in a cemetery of his own making. Upon reaching the Thorn Global Tower, a shimmering monument to his ambition, he saw a crowd of reporters and photographers gathered at the entrance, their cameras flashing like a volley of gunfire. The news had spread. While Alexander was airborne, Scarlett Blake had dropped the bomb. Her podcast, The Blake Report, had released a special episode, an explosive exposé detailing the affair between Alexander Thorn and Zara Petrov. It had everything: the clandestine trip to the Caymans, the hotel name, the suite number, the diamond necklace. It was a brutal, meticulous dismantling, and it had gone viral. By the time Alexander's plane landed, his name was trending on X, formerly Twitter, and his face was on every gossip blog and news site on the planet. But the affair was only the first assault. Victoria had saved the real ammunition for the board meeting. He was hustled through a back entrance, avoiding the media circus, and taken directly to the 50th floor boardroom. The room, usually a testament to his power, was now an execution chamber. The long, polished mahogany table was lined with the stern, unforgiving faces of the board of directors. At the head of the table, in the chairman's seat, sat Victoria's father, Lord Alistair Ashford, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. And next to him, in the seat rightfully belonging to Alexander, sat Victoria. She wore a simple but elegant black dress, her pregnancy a silent, powerful statement in the room. She looked calm, serene, her eyes clear and steady. The bird in the gilded cage was gone. In her place was a woman as formidable as any an industry titan in that room. "Alexander," Lord Ashford's voice was like the crack of a whip, cutting through the thick, tense silence. "Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss." Alexander opened his mouth to speak, to offer some defense, some explanation, but Victoria cut him off. "There is no need for preliminaries, Father," she said, her voice ringing with an authority that hushed the room. She stood, and on the large screen behind her, the screen usually reserved for projecting quarterly earnings and market analysis, an image appeared. It was a high-resolution photograph of Alexander and Zara kissing on the balcony of their Cayman suite. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Alexander felt the last of his composure crumble. He was exposed, humiliated, his betrayal laid bare for all to see. "As you can see," Victoria continued, her voice cold and even, "my husband has been very busy. His recent trip to the Caymans, which he claimed was for a crucial business meeting, was, in fact, a romantic rendezvous with his mistress, Ms. Zara Petrov." She then proceeded with the quiet, methodical precision of a seasoned prosecutor to lay out her case. She presented the photographs and video footage from Marcus Thorne's team, a damning visual record of the affair. She played a recording of her last phone call with Alexander, the one where he had effortlessly lied about the success of his business meetings. But she did not stop there. "This is not just about infidelity. This is about the future of the company. My husband's personal indiscretions, while deeply painful to me, are not the primary reason we are here tonight," she said, her eyes sweeping over the stunned faces of the board members. "His recklessness extends far beyond his marital vows. It threatens the very foundation of this company." On the screen behind her, the affair images were replaced by a complex web of flowcharts and financial statements. It was the dossier prepared by Orion and his team. Victoria, with the help of her corporate attorney, who sat quietly in a corner of the room, began to walk the board through Alexander's elaborate embezzlement scheme. She exposed the shell companies, the fraudulent invoices, the siphoning of millions of dollars in company funds. She showed them the bank transfers to Zara Petrov's secret account in Liechtenstein, and then, for the grand finale, she displayed the architectural blueprints of the $30 million villa in Portofino, a lavish love nest built with stolen money in the boardroom. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning. The board members, titans of finance and industry, men who had seen everything, stared at the screen in stunned disbelief. They were confronted with fraud of staggering audacity, a betrayal of trust that reached the very core of their corporate ethics. Alexander stood there, naked, his lies and deception exposed to the harsh, unforgiving light of the boardroom. He looked at Victoria. He truly looked at her. And for the first time, he saw the woman he had married. Not the pretty, malleable heiress, but a queen, a warrior, a woman who had just checkmated him in the most public and brutal way imaginable. Lord Alistair Ashford finally broke the silence, rising to his feet, his face etched with a deep, terrible sadness. But his voice was firm. "In light of this evidence," he said, the word catching in his throat, "I have no choice but to call for a vote of no confidence in our CEO, Alexander Thorne. Furthermore, I propose that we immediately launch a full-scale independent forensic audit of the company's financials and turn over all our findings to the relevant authorities, including the SEC and the Department of Justice." He looked at Alexander, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and scorn. "You have disgraced yourself. You have disgraced this company, and you have disgraced my family. You are finished." The vote was a mere formality. One by one, the board members raised their hands, a forest of condemnation. Alexander Thorne, the golden boy of the stock market, the master of the universe, was unanimously and unceremoniously stripped of his title, his power, and his future. As security guards escorted him out of the building, he looked back at Victoria one last time. Her face was impassive, but her eyes, for a fleeting moment, betrayed a flicker of the immense pain he had caused her. But there was no triumph in her gaze, no gloating, only a quiet, sad resolution. He had built an empire, but he had forgotten the one rule that governs all empires. They are vulnerable in the end, and his had been brought down not by a corporate raider or a market crash, but by the one person he thought he had under his complete control. His wife. Interaction. What did you think of Victoria's ultimate reveal? Do you think Alexander deserved that ending? Comment your opinion, and share this video if the truth has impacted you. 5. The Phoenix Rises. The new Thorne Global Alexander Thorne's fall was not a gentle decline. It was a seismic event that sent shockwaves from the New York Stock Exchange to the highest echelons of global finance. The morning after the boardroom ambush, Thorne Global was a company under siege. The stock, a blue-chip giant for a decade, opened in freefall, losing value with every passing minute. On the trading floor, the ticker symbol TGL flashed a violent, frantic red, a digital scream of investor flight. Billions in market capitalization evaporated into the ether. A lifetime of work by thousands of employees and the fortunes of investors were turned to dust by the caprice of a disgraced CEO's avarice and lust. Inside the gleaming Thorne Global Tower, the atmosphere was a toxic cocktail of fear and chaos. Employees who had once walked the halls with the arrogant confidence of industry leaders now huddled in quiet, anxious groups around coffee machines, their eyes glued to the news headlines on their screens. The meticulously selected photographs from Marcus Thorne's team were everywhere. The image of Alexander and Zara on the Cayman balcony was now an iconic symbol of corporate hubris. Rumors swirled that Zara Petrov had been sighted in Dubai, then Moscow, the stolen millions from the Liechtenstein account, ensuring her a life of luxury, far beyond the reach of any extradition treaty. The half-finished villa in Portofino became a tourist attraction for yachts cruising the Italian Riviera, a modern ruin of a fallen king. For Alexander, the 24 hours following his expulsion from the boardroom were a descent into a personal hell. Holed up in a friend's multi-million-dollar loft in downtown Manhattan, he was a man crumbling. The friend, a hedge fund manager, who had made a fortune on Alexander's tips, had offered the refuge out of a sense of past obligation, but his welcome was thin and tinged with the fear of association. Alexander, unshaven and fueled by whiskey and rage, frantically worked the phone, calling in favors from men who had once clamored for his attention. But the calls went unanswered. His contacts in banking, politics, and media had become ghosts. He was radioactive, a pariah. His attempts to move what little money he had left in personal accounts were blocked, every transaction flagged by financial institutions now under immense scrutiny. He was trapped. His vast wealth now a digital mirage he could see but not touch. His world had shrunk to the four walls of a borrowed apartment, the city he once owned now hostile territory. The end came, as it so often does, with the quiet, gray light of dawn. The loud, authoritative knock on the door was no surprise, but a brutal, final confirmation of his utter ruin. As federal agents led him out in handcuffs, the flashes of the waiting press were like a final, merciless volley of gunfire. The man who had graced the cover of Forbes and Fortune, the industry titan, was now just another perp being escorted away. His bespoke suit, a wrinkled, pathetic symbol of how low he had fallen. For Victoria, the public spectacle of her husband's demise brought no joy, only a deep, weary sadness. She watched the news reports from the isolation of her father's mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, having fled the Park Avenue penthouse that now felt contaminated by ghosts. Every image of Alexander's downfall was a fresh reminder of the man she had once loved, the future she had believed in. The victory was absolute, but the cost had been immense. Her private sorrow had become public property, a global soap opera for the masses to consume. She was flooded with interview requests, with lucrative book and movie offers. Scarlett Blake's podcast had broken all records, making Scarlett a household name and Victoria a reluctant icon. She was hailed as a hero, a symbol of female empowerment. But in the quiet moments, when the lawyers and consultants were gone, she only felt the profound ache of betrayal and the overwhelming weight of the future. It was in this state of exhaustion and uncertainty that her father, Lord Alistair Ashford, approached her with the proposal that would redefine her life. He found her in the library, staring out at the rain-slicked streets, her hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. "The board is in agreement," he said, his voice soft. "They want you to take over as interim CEO." Victoria turned, her expression a mix of disbelief and horror. "Absolutely not, Father. That's insane. I'm an art historian. I'm having a baby. What do I know about running a multi-billion-dollar global conglomerate?" "You know more than you think," Lord Ashford insisted, sitting beside her. "You have a mind for strategy, Victoria. I've seen it your whole life. You saw the rot in Thorn Global before anyone else. You didn't just weep or run. You gathered intelligence, you built a team, and you executed an impeccable plan that decapitated the corruption at its source. That was not the act of a scorned wife. It was the act of a leader. It was the act of a woman trying to protect her son's future," she countered, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't want that life. I don't want the spotlight. I want to build a nursery and raise my son in peace." "And you will," he said, taking her hand. "But think of the legacy you will build for him. Do you want his company, his inheritance, to be run by a committee of strangers, forever tainted by this scandal? Or do you want it led by his mother, the woman who saved it? You are the only person who can restore integrity to that name, Victoria. The only one who can signal a true, clean break from the past. The world sees you as a victim. This is your chance to show them who you really are. A survivor, a builder, the woman who reclaimed her power." His words struck a deep chord within her. He was right. Hiding away would mean letting Alexander's actions forever define the company, and, by extension, her son's legacy. Stepping up, terrifying as it was the only way to truly reclaim the narrative, to build something new and clean from the wreckage. With a deep breath that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul, Victoria Ashford nodded. "All right, Father. I'll do it." Her first day as interim CEO was a baptism by fire. The moment she stepped out of her car in front of the Thorn Global Tower, a frantic pack of reporters descended, shouting questions. She walked through them with a quiet, majestic grace, her face a mask of serene determination, offering only a polite but firm "no comment." Her first act was not to retreat to the 50th floor executive suite, but to call an all-hands meeting in the building's towering glass atrium. Standing on a simple stage, She looked out at the thousands of employees, their faces a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and hope. She was not the CEO they were used to. She was a woman. She was pregnant. And she was the wife of the man who had brought them to the brink of disaster. "I know what you are all thinking," she began, her voice clear and amplified by the microphone, yet retaining an intimate personal quality. "You are looking at me and wondering what an Ashford heiress, an art historian, can do to fix this mess. The truth is, I cannot fix it alone. This company is not about one person. It was never supposed to be." She laid out the raw truth of the scandal, her voice devoid of self-pity, but filled with a palpable rage for the betrayal of trust. Then she pivoted, laying out a vision for a new Thorn Global, one built on transparency, accountability, and a return to core values. She announced the immediate sale of the corporate jet and the executive car fleet. She canceled the multi-million-dollar luxury leadership retreat Alexander had planned at a high-end Aspen resort. "The era of obscene excess at Thorn Global is over," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Our new currency will be trust. Our new status symbol will be integrity." The speech was met with a moment of stunned silence, then a ripple of applause that grew into a thunderous ovation. It was a masterstroke, a perfect blend of humility and strength that won the hearts and minds of her most important asset, her people. In the ensuing weeks, Victoria proved her words were not mere rhetoric. She was a whirlwind of focused energy, working 18-hour days with a discipline that impressed even the most seasoned board veterans. She tore down the opaque corporate structure Alexander had built, replacing it with a more streamlined, collaborative model. She promoted talented executives from within the company, many of whom had been overlooked by Alexander's boys' club culture. She proved to be a shrewd, decisive leader. Her outsider perspective allowed her to see problems and solutions that the entrenched old guard had missed. 2 months into her tenure, 3 months before her due date, she gave birth to a healthy, beautiful baby boy. In the quiet, sterile peace of the hospital room, far from the chaos of boardrooms and balance sheets, she held him in her arms and wept. They were tears of joy, of relief, and of a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. She named him Liam Alastair Ashford. He would carry her name, the name of a family that valued honor above all else, and the name of the grandfather who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. Holding her son, looking at his small, sleeping face, Victoria felt the last vestiges of the victim fade away. The pain of Alexander's betrayal was a scar she would forever carry, a permanent part of her history. But it was no longer the defining chapter. She had stared into the abyss of a destroyed life and refused to fall. Instead, she had built a bridge over it. She was no longer a bird in a gilded cage, nor was she merely the woman who had brought down a king. She was a queen in her own right, the architect of a new dynasty forged not by privilege, but by pain, resilience, and an unbreakable will. Her greatest work of art was not a painting on a wall, but the future she was now building for herself, for her company, and for her son. If this story has captivated you, don't keep the excitement to yourself. Like it, share it with your friends who love stories of epic comebacks, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger and more compelling than fiction. Your support helps us keep bringing you stories that impact and inspire.